You think you're a good person. You smile, you hold the door for strangers, you apologize when you're late. You say the right things, you follow the rules, you try not to offend anyone. But underneath all that politeness, there's something else. A tension, a constant, quiet pressure. And if you're honest, you don't even know where it comes from. That's because the real you is buried, not gone, just hidden. Pushed down so deep you can't recognize it anymore, covered in guilt, trapped in shame, locked behind the bars of what you think is right, acceptable, lovable. Freud didn't just talk about childhood trauma or sex or dreams. He talked about a war inside you, between who you are and who you were told you're allowed to be. You weren't born guilty. You were made guilty, taught to be ashamed, taught to silence your instincts, the urge to scream, to fight, to touch, to rage, to desire, to dominate. All of it wasn't erased. It was buried. And the more you buried it, the more you became the version of yourself that everyone else could accept. But not the one you could accept. You feel anxious, and you don't know why. You sabotage your own peace and don't understand it. You explode in anger over small things and then feel remorse for days. You try to fix your life over and over, but it slips through your fingers like sand. That's not failure. That's repression. Your unconscious fighting for oxygen. Freud called it the return of the repressed. Those instincts you thought you killed, they're not dead. They're haunting you. They show up in your dreams, in your compulsions, in the way you chase pain and call it love, in how you avoid pleasure because you think you don't deserve it. You say, I'm just like this, but you're not. You were made like this, molded, suppressed, programmed. You don't know what you really want, because wanting was never safe, so you want what's allowed. You want approval, validation. You chase roles instead of freedom. You've mistaken guilt for goodness. But guilt is not morality, shame is not virtue, and repression is not control. It's self-erasure. And that's why you're exhausted, why joy feels temporary and peace feels fake. Because the version of you walking around every day is only half alive. The other half is locked away in the basement of your psyche, screaming to be let out. But you've been taught that if you ever did, if you ever truly let go, truly felt what you feel, said what you want to say, did what you're drawn to do, you'd be rejected, hated, punished. So you police yourself. You shrink, you perform, you survive, you wake up already tired. Not from lack of sleep, but from fighting yourself. Every decision becomes negotiation. Every desire goes through a filter. Is this right? Is this too much? What will they think? And somewhere along the way, you forgot that this voice in your head, the one that questions everything you feel, wasn't always there. It was installed. Freud said that much of what you think is your conscience is just your fear of punishment dressed up as virtue. You think you're being ethical, but really, you're just being obedient. You call it maturity, but it's fear in disguise. You've mistaken suppression for strength, but strength isn't silence. Strength is knowing what you want and being unafraid to want it. That's why your emotions leak through the cracks, in your sarcasm, in your passive aggression, in the way you cry during movies but never in real life. You're bleeding through metaphors because direct feeling terrifies you. You've learned to intellectualize your suffering, to joke about your emptiness because that's safer than feeling it. And the cost is your aliveness, because the parts of you that feel too dangerous to express, those are also the parts that feel the most alive. And you can't selectively numb. If you repress your rage, you also dull your passion. If you kill your sexual instinct, you kill your vitality. If you reject your darkness, you'll never know your power. So you keep chasing little highs, small wins, compliments, validation from people who don't even know you, anything to distract you from the truth. You've never really met yourself. You've only met the version of you that's safe to show. Freud wasn't trying to fix you. He was trying to wake you up. He didn't see repression as evil, just as dangerous when unconscious. He believed the shadow could be your ally if you had the courage to face it. But you can't do that while pretending you have no shadow at all. So maybe it's time to ask harder questions. Who would I be if I stopped trying to be good? Who am I beneath the guilt, beneath the shame? What if the most honest version of me, the one I've spent a lifetime suppressing, isn't a monster, but a mirror? That's where we begin next. You spend your whole life trying to be someone you can live with. But the truth is, you've been trained to live with a version of you that doesn't even belong to you. It belongs to your parents' expectations, to your culture's rules, to society's reward system. Every time you made a choice as a child and got punished for it, part of you was exiled. Every time you expressed something raw and got shut down, part of you was rewritten. So you learned to edit yourself, not consciously, not maliciously, just to survive. Freud saw it clearly. The human mind isn't a blank canvas, it's a battleground. The super-ego, that voice in your head demanding perfection, politeness, control, is not your guide. It's your jailer, installed by authority figures, rewarded by fear, reinforced by shame. And every time you try to rebel, it doubles down. It tells you that wanting is weakness, that desire is dangerous, that your real self is unworthy. This is why your joy feels counterfeit, why pleasure always comes with guilt, why even when things go well you still feel haunted. Because you're living in the house of your own repression, pretending it's home. But repression doesn't eliminate the desire, it just drives it underground. It becomes fantasy, it becomes obsession, it becomes compulsion. That's what Freud meant when he said the unconscious is timeless. It doesn't forget, it just waits until it leaks out in dreams, in slips of the tongue, in self-sabotage, in addictions you can't explain. You think you're choosing, but what if you're just acting out an internal script you didn't write? You date people who resemble the parent who withheld love. You pursue careers that mirror the approval you never received. You stay quiet in conflict because your inner child still fears abandonment. And you wonder why your life feels like a loop. Freud would tell you it is, and it will be, until you bring what's unconscious to the surface. But facing it isn't easy, because the moment you start digging, you realize how much of you isn't really you. Your dreams were hand-me-downs, your personality a patchwork of coping mechanisms, your choices reactions to fear, not expressions of freedom. And that's when the guilt hits, not because you did something wrong, but because you based your entire identity on avoiding that guilt. And here's the trap. Shame keeps you small, but it also feels safe, familiar. You've lived in it for so long, it became your baseline. And the moment you try to step out of it, to reclaim your instincts, to feel fully, to want fully, the shame rushes back in, whispering that you're selfish, that you're wrong, that you'll lose love if you stop performing. But what kind of love is that? If they only love the version of you that performs, do they love you or just the mask you wear? Freud's work wasn't about blame, it was about responsibility. You didn't create this system, but now it lives in you. Now you carry it. And that means you have power, not to erase it, but to expose it, to question it, to stop mistaking repression for character. There's a word Freud used that people misunderstand: neurosis. He wasn't talking about craziness. He meant the everyday madness of being split, of living one life on the surface while another screams underneath. You post smiling photos while feeling dead inside. You give advice you don't follow. You play a role so convincingly you forget you're acting, and it's slowly breaking you. But there's a way out, not through more control, not through perfection, but through confrontation. You confront the guilt by asking where it came from. You confront the shame by asking who benefits from it. You confront the mask by letting it crack just a little, enough for light to get in, because underneath all of it, the fear, the performance, the obedience, there's still a pulse, a flicker, a wild, unshamed, unfiltered self, the one that laughed too loudly, the one that danced without knowing how, the one that wanted without apology. That part of you isn't gone, just buried. And the deeper you dig, the more you'll feel it, not as a concept, but as energy, raw, charged, alive. This is what Freud meant when he talked about sublimation, the idea that your instincts don't need to be killed. They can be transformed. Your aggression becomes passion. Your desire becomes creation. Your longing becomes expression. But only if you stop pretending you don't feel them in the first place, because you can't transform what you refuse to admit. And that's where most people stay stuck, in denial, in guilt, in a curated, numb existence, always wondering why it feels like something is missing, always searching for meaning in a life they never fully chose. But you're here, reading this, listening, feeling something stir. That's the beginning. That's the moment the script starts to glitch. When the old story, the one you were told to live, stops fitting. And the question becomes, do you double down on the mask, or do you risk becoming real? Next, we'll get closer to the danger zone, the place where guilt is exposed as control and shame is revealed for what it really is, a leash dressed as virtue. Stay with it. You say you want peace. You say you want clarity, connection, purpose. But what if you're lying to yourself, not intentionally, not maliciously, but unconsciously? What if you say you want freedom, and yet everything in you resists it? Because freedom comes with a cost. It demands you face the parts of yourself you've spent your whole life avoiding, and that's terrifying. So instead, you sabotage. You call it bad luck. You call it anxiety. You call it just the way I am. But it's none of those things. It's the real you banging on the inside of the cage you've put it in, and your ego doing everything it can to keep that door shut. Freud didn't believe the unconscious was a passive place. He saw it as alive, dynamic, dangerous, powerful. And when something in you is buried long enough, it doesn't stay quiet. It gets loud, not with words, but with symptoms, patterns, emotional eruptions, sudden fear, cravings you don't understand, sabotage that makes no sense. You think it's random, it's not. It's repression, backfiring. You procrastinate, not because you're lazy, but because what you're chasing doesn't belong to you. You stay in the wrong relationship, not because you love them, but because you're afraid of who you might become without them. You keep your life small, not because you're not capable, but because expansion would force you to confront what you've buried. It's not your life that's broken. It's your internal contract with repression. And here's the paradox. The more you repress, the more life finds ways to reveal it. You dream of losing control, of falling, of being naked in public. These aren't just metaphors, they're signals. The unconscious doesn't care about your image, it cares about your truth. And when the two don't align, it causes conflict, sometimes slow and silent, sometimes violent and sudden. That inner conflict shows up as fatigue that rest doesn't fix, as tension in your jaw, your neck, your chest, as overthinking, as numbness. You call it burnout, but it's not about work, it's about disconnection. Your system is tired of pretending. It's collapsing under the weight of being someone you're not, and yet you resist the release. Because what's real feels risky. Your real thoughts, they might offend someone. Your real needs, they might get rejected. Your real boundaries, they might leave you alone. So you keep the mask on and call it being mature. You call it being nice. You call it doing what's right. But really, it's fear. Fear of being seen. Because being seen means being judged. And you've learned to fear judgment more than you fear suffocation. But judgment won't kill you. Repression will. This is what Freud saw most clearly. The psyche doesn't destroy you because you're broken. It breaks you because you've silenced your own voice for too long. And the longer you silence it, the more violent it becomes. Rage turned inward becomes depression. Desire turned inward becomes shame. Grief turned inward becomes numbness. You're not emotionally unstable. You're emotionally imprisoned. And still, you try to manage it. You build routines. You drink water. You meditate. You journal. You watch motivational content. You try to fix yourself. But here's the truth. You don't need to be fixed. You need to be unburied. You need to stop treating symptoms and start confronting the source. The part of you that's been screaming from the basement, "This is not who I am." But confrontation requires courage. It requires asking questions you don't want the answers to. Like, what do I actually want? Not what I've been taught to want. Whose love am I still trying to earn? What part of myself did I abandon to be accepted? And most of all, what will happen if I stop pretending? Because that's the real fear, isn't it? That if you take the mask off, there will be nothing underneath. That without the performance, you won't be enough. That the guilt, the shame, the years of pretending have hollowed you out. But that's a lie. A lie shame tells you to keep you quiet. The truth is, the parts of you you've buried are still alive, just waiting. Not to ruin your life, but to finally give it back to you. The anger you suppressed, it's not evil. It's your power, misdirected. The desire you buried, it's not shameful. It's your compass, ignored. The grief you never allowed, it's not weakness. It's your gateway to healing. Everything you've rejected is everything you need. Not to become someone else, but to finally become yourself. But it won't happen automatically. You have to make a choice between comfort and truth, between numbness and aliveness, between staying hidden and stepping into full exposure. And that's not a one-time decision. That's a daily revolt against your conditioning, against your programming, against every voice that told you to shrink. You don't owe the world your mask. You owe yourself your truth, even if it's messy, even if it's inconvenient. Especially then. And maybe that's where real transformation begins. Not in becoming better, but in becoming honest. Not in adding more, but in shedding what was never you to begin with. Because the cage is not locked. The door is open, but only you can walk out. The question is, what part of you is still afraid to leave? We'll go there next. There's a moment, if you let it come, when the pain of hiding becomes greater than the fear of being seen. When pretending starts to burn more than exposure ever could. When you realize the cage isn't protecting you, it's killing you. This is where most people turn back, because stepping out means more than just honesty. It means losing the identity you've built, the one that kept you safe, the one everyone liked, the one that knew how to stay small enough not to threaten anyone, obedient enough not to get punished, agreeable enough to be loved conditionally. But that identity was never you. It was a survival strategy. And like all strategies, it had an expiration date. You feel it in the tightness of your chest, in the restless thoughts at 2 a.m., in the way your joy feels thin, like paper, and how often you say, "I'm fine," and feel like you're lying. You're not broken, you're buried. And now the truth is clawing its way out. Freud knew what people feared most wasn't pain or death. It was the unconscious. Because the unconscious holds everything we pretend not to know. The jealousy we deny. The rage we call stress. The fantasies we label wrong. The needs we've silenced for decades. And if you unlock that door, even a little, everything changes. Because once you see what's been hidden, you can't unsee it. You'll look at your relationships and realize who loved your mask and who loved you. You'll notice the micro-compromises, the moments you said yes when everything in you screamed no, and how they stacked up to build a life you never actually chose. You'll remember the first time you felt ashamed for being loud, for wanting attention, for crying, for being honest, and how that shame became your blueprint for every interaction since. And you'll understand, this isn't just personal, it's generational, cultural, systemic. We raise children to obey, not to express, to behave, not to feel, to suppress, not to understand. We punish them for instincts, then tell them to be authentic. We shame their anger, then ask why they're anxious. We tell them to be good, but good means quiet, compliant, easy to control. So, they grow up to become adults who apologize for existing, who seek permission to rest, who need validation to feel worthy, who equate exhaustion with value, who fear rejection so much they abandon themselves first just to make it easier when the world does it. But the real tragedy, they think this is normal. They think this is just how life works. You don't need another book, Another checklist, another positive affirmation pasted over your pain like a bandage on a broken bone. You need to grieve. Grieve the years spent hiding. Grieve the relationships that only worked when you weren't fully yourself. Grieve the parts of you that withered, waiting for permission that never came. Because grief isn't weakness. Grief is the gate. The only way out is through it. When you finally stop running, not just from others, but from yourself, you'll feel it. Not bliss, not instant peace, but clarity. Cold, sobering, powerful clarity. The voice that says, "This is who I am, and I'm done apologizing for it." That doesn't mean you scream your truth at everyone. It doesn't mean you abandon empathy or become reckless. It means you stop making yourself smaller for people who refuse to grow. It means you stop twisting yourself into shapes that when you love, you'll resent later. It means you speak, not to please, but to be honest. And when you do, some people will leave. Let them. They weren't staying for you. They were staying for your performance. Let them go. Because what you'll find in that silence is something you've never felt before. Integrity, not the moral kind, the structural kind, wholeness, inner alignment. You say what you mean what you feel what you feel, without needing permission. That's power, not dominance, not control, not perfection. Power as presence, the kind of presence that doesn't need to prove itself, that doesn't chase approval, that doesn't collapse under pressure. The kind of presence that stands in a room silent and everyone senses it. That's what's waiting on the other side of shame, of guilt, of repression. Not a better version of you, a truer one. The real you is not a concept. It's not a brand. It's not a personality type. It's not what your trauma made you. It's not what your family tolerated. It's not the you that gets applause. It's the one who remains when you stop performing. And yes, it's going to cost you. People will misunderstand you. Some will accuse you of changing, of being difficult, of being cold. But that's because they only knew the version of you who never said no. They don't miss you. They miss your compliance. Let them grieve, because you've got more important things to do now. You've got a life to reclaim. You've got truths to tell, even if your voice shakes. You've got desires to honor, even if they scare you. You've got boundaries to draw, even if it means standing alone. This is not rebellion, this is resurrection. And it doesn't happen all at once. It happens in moments, quiet, brave, unglamorous moments. The moment you speak up, when it would be easier to stay silent. The moment you sit with discomfort instead of numbing it. The moment you walk away, not to hurt someone, but to stop hurting yourself. These moments add up. And one day, without even realizing it, you'll wake up and feel it. No more mask, no more guilt, no more shame. Just you, breathing, alive, finally